Okay, it's very echoey. It's all right. Anyway, good evening. Welcome to this meeting of the Executive. My name is Councillor Clive Jones. I'm the leader of the council and will be chairing the meeting. Would you please ensure that any mobile devices or mobile phones are switched off? If you're participating via Teams, when you are not speaking or being asked to speak, please mute your microphones. Please also note that the meeting is currently being webcast live. I'd like to introduce the members of the executive who are here tonight. We've got David Hare, Sarah Kerr, Prue Bray, Lindsay Ferris, Paul Fishwick, Ian Shenton and Rachel Bishop Firth. And we have apologies from Stephen Conway and Imogen Shepherd-Dubé. I'm just looking at the screen just in case they appear. Stephen is in Edinburgh. Stephen is in Edinburgh, was hoping to be able to attend, but has had issues with his Wi-Fi. And Imogen is in the middle of the United States on holiday. Item number 61. We're asked to confirm the minutes of the executive meeting on the 27th of October 2022. Are members content to agree with these minutes? If they are, I'll sign them. Yep. Thank you very much. Any declarations of interest? And can I remind members that they must specify which agenda item their interest relates to? No declarations of interest? No. So item 63 is a shortish statement by me as the leader of the council. I was very hopeful that the budget from Jeremy Hunt and Rishi Sunak last Thursday would have provided Wokingham Borough Council with more cash to help us through the next few years, which are going to be very difficult now that inflation has risen to 11.1% and looking like it will increase further through next year. Sadly, I was wrong. There was little good news for the council and certainly no extra cash, which is desperately needed. I was hoping that Wokingham would no longer be the lowest funded unitary council in the country and that we would get our fair share of cash from the government for the first time in probably 8 years. But it didn't happen. There wasn't anything for Wokingham. We are still starved of cash by the Conservative government. So no extra cash for Wokingham Council and not much for our residents either. The tax burden rises to its highest level since the Second World War, with 34 million people set to be paying more tax. Someone earning an average salary of £32,300 faces an extra £1,645 charge for tax, energy costs and fuel costs. On top of these increases, interest costs for the average mortgage has risen by £500 a month, or £6,000 a year, since the disastrous Truss Kwarteng Redwood budget, meaning many households in Wokingham will now have £7,500 less to spend in the local economy. This will have a serious negative impact on Wokingham's retailers, cafes, pubs and restaurants, making it very difficult for some of them to survive. Restaurant closures are currently up 60% and now disappearing at a faster rate than they were during COVID. These are caused by rising costs, weak demand and Brexit-induced staff shortages. If any do not survive in Wokingham, it will be the fault of the government and their disastrous handling of the country's economy. I would like to encourage our local businesses to try to organise end of year and Christmas office parties and events in our local venues wherever they can. We'll now move on to public question time and item 64. There shouldn't be any question about extending public questions because there are only a couple today, 4, sorry. And the first question is from Colin Watts for the executive member for planning and the local plan, Lindsay Ferris.
Good evening. Wokingham Borough Council recently published the 250-page LPU report on initial consultation outcomes document. Page 20 of this document states that a local MP supported the identification of a new garden village at Hall Farm, Loddon Valley, particularly its links to the Thames Valley Science Park. Most people I've spoken to assumed that Sir John Redwood was the MP referred to, but he has confirmed that he did not make the statement. For the sake of transparency and accountability, can you please advise which MP made this statement, and can the initial consultation outcomes document be amended to state the name of the MP?
Thank you, Colin. Got a very short answer. Whilst I understand the reason for your question, I do not consider it appropriate for me to identify individuals who have responded to consultations.
Do you have a supplementary question, Colin?
Yes, please. Whilst it may be understandable that responses to the LPU consultation from individual members of the public should be confidential, a response from the elected representative is a completely different proposition. Without naming the MP, isn't there a real danger that the public are being misled, given the fact that the MP in question is highly likely to be a resident in the north of the borough and is therefore not as neutral as regards where new housing should be built in the borough?
Right words.
You may possibly think that. I can't. Sorry.
There's an etiquette associated with MPs, and reason that reluctant to indicate who it is that I feel, and we feel, that if the MP wanted it to be known widely, that MP could indicate on their own and say, yes, it was me. The alternative, of course, is you could write to the MPs, or you could put in a freedom of information request to the council.
Thank you for your question, Colin. Our second question is from Wayne Cannon, and he is attending remotely, but I don't think he's there, so he will receive a written answer. The third question is from Rich Jarvis, and I don't think he is attending, so he'll receive a written answer. So we move to Andy Bailey, who has a question for Lindsay Ferris, Executive Member for Planning and the Local Plan.
Good evening.
Good evening.
Can you hear me okay? Great, okay. Given the state of the economy and the dire economical outlook, does WBC intend to borrow forwards to enable infrastructures to be built in good time to support developments arising from the revised local plan?
Thank you for your question. You are right that the economic outlook for the country is gloomy at the moment, and in common with national government, local government will need to handle its financial resources very carefully going forwards. However, it is important the new infrastructure gets delivered in parallel with the new development. As we move forward, we will therefore continue to work with developers to ensure new development is brought forward in parallel with well-planned and well-timed new infrastructure. In some circumstances, developers will be expected to provide this directly in accordance with legal agreements and the conditions of their permission. Where we collect community infrastructure levy, we will also look to spend levy funds in a timely manner. In terms of our own capital programme, we will need to be financially prudent in terms of the extent of borrowing we as a council undertake to fund future infrastructure. That doesn't mean we will stop funding infrastructure or delivering it in a timely way, but it does mean that we will look very carefully at every decision we take in this respect, something which I've no doubt all our local taxpayers will want us to do, mindful of the times we find ourselves in.
Thank you.
You have a supplementary, Andy?
I do.
Yep.
So given that the proposals for Hall Farm appears to be predicated on 2 times 15-year plan periods to deliver 4,500 units. And it is not possible to forecast flood risk due to climate change so far in advance. How would the council protect council taxpayers from stranded borrowing costs if, due to flood events, it were not possible to complete the project and recover projected SIL payments from developers?
I have on 2 occasions raised my concern about the flood issue and the fact that now we have requirement that there needs to be a flood resilience aspect associated with the overall period of a development. And on that front, we are currently taking legal advice as to whether we can go beyond or stay at 15 years.
Thank you. Thank you, Lindsay.
Thanks very much. We now move on to member questions, and there is one question from Councillor Gary Cowan for Lindsay Ferris, Executive Member for Planning and the Local Plan. Are you there, Gary?
I'm here, but not visually.
That's fine.
Can the Executive Member for Planning explain the relationship to conditions placed on planning applications at their inception and their eventual sign-off? Is there a scheme or time frame to ensure their compliance?
Good evening, Gary. Planning conditions are imposed to ensure that development mitigates its impact. They should be kept to a minimum and only imposed where they are necessary to meet the tests contained within the NPPF. There are 2 main types of conditions: those that require specific discharge of information to be submitted and those that require adherence in perpetuity. Through the planning process, details relating to the relevant conditions are submitted and assessed by the relevant technical officers within the council or by statutory external consultees, such as the Environmental Agency. The application of these conditions would usually be reviewed as part of the development process itself. If the development is found to not be in accordance with the approved details, the local planning authority's planning enforcement functions, or in some circumstances another body, for example, Highways Authority or Environmental Agency, will consider whether formal action is necessary or expedient to ensure compliance. The local planning authority should respond to requests to discharge conditions without delay and must give notice to the applicant of its decisions within a period of 8 weeks or any longer period agreed in writing.
Thanks, Lindsay. Do you have a supplementary, Gary?
Yes, and thank you for that, Lindsay. I served on the all-party tree and biodiversity task and finish group, which lasted about 6 months last year. The committee asked the planning department about the planning conditions on the replacement of dead trees after 5 years, and the answer was we do not do it. As experts suggested, 20 to 25% of new trees die within 5 years, and that would suggest they're not replaced, and the numbers lost must run into many thousands, really. Also, the Reading Football Club training ground planning application approved 7 years ago had 58 planning conditions placed on it, and I asked last year how many had been signed off, and the answer I got then was none. Since then, I've received a very welcome spreadsheet showing a progress report on all of the 58 conditions in various stages of progress. And so to summarise, they're not checking new planted trees within 5-year planning condition period, and also after 6 years, no follow-up then had apparently taken place at the Reading Football Club training ground planning. I understand some of the complications involved in the planning arena, but is this an acceptable way in dealing with planning conditions?
Thank you, Gary. I understand you've had a response from Director on the specifics of the individual planning application that you mentioned, which obviously I cannot comment on. But on the points you've raised, particularly about dead trees and the like, I have had discussions with officers to say that exceedingly concerned that a very high number of trees have been planted and nothing has happened regarding tendering them to be kept alive and watering them, and as a result, many have died. I have been advised that the council has gone to developers and said that you need to replant. We only have a period of up to 5 years that we can do that, but I've been pushing very hard with the officers to make sure that the trees that are planted, as many as possible, can survive. And also tonight we have the draft tree strategy which you referred to in your question, and as this is going out for consultation, if it is not included in sufficient detail, that is one of the areas that I would suggest that residents and yourself put in extra message to say that if we have trees that have been planted by a developer, we need to have some means of making sure that as many of those trees as possible survive.
Thank you very much for that. The tree issue being consulted on tonight, I thought that was just to do with council-owned land. Anyway, thank you very much. That's a very welcome answer.
Thank you, Gary. We now move on to item number 66. At the meeting of the council on the 17th of November 2022, we agreed to a referral to the executive by the council. We are asked to consider the petition on car parking charges, which was the subject of a debate at the council meeting. Can I ask the executive member for active travel, transport and highways, Councillor Paul Fishwick, to introduce this item?
Thank you, Clive. The last time off-street car parking fees rose in Wokingham was nearly 5 years ago. Despite rising costs in providing the service, the previous administration didn't keep pace with those costs. Last year, the previous Conservative administration did propose to cover the growing shortfall with a car parking recovery plan that was published in the Corporate and Community Overview and Scrutiny Committee report on the 24th November 2021, with an estimated additional income of £500,000. If they'd gone ahead with that, it would have made a significant reduction in the financial shortfall that we now face. But unfortunately, the previous administration failed to deal with it, and we are now picking up the consequences of their lack of action. Instead, they chose to plunder the reserves, where they took 2.2 million. At the meeting of the executive on the 28th of July 2022, we were provided with a report indicating a budget shortfall of 600,000 to 800,000 for this year. So what options are available to balance the car parking service budget? Taking funding from the reserves? Taking funding from the reserves, like the previous administration did, is not an option open to us, as the reserves are now too low, and we cannot allow this authority to be placed in the hands of central government like Slough and Thurrock, and a growing list of other authorities, as the consequences would be devastating. What about closing the park and rides? Let's go through them one by one. Mere Oak, operated jointly with Reading Borough Council, is open and running at about 25% pre-pandemic levels. The 600 bus service operates from here and also services villages south of the M4, such as 3 Mile Cross, Spencer's Wood, Swallowfield, Risley, Shinfield, and with additional financial support from Wokingham Borough Council. Without the park and ride, those bus services would be at severe risk without further significant additional financial support from Wokingham Borough Council. Local bus services allow children to get to school, and vulnerable adults can travel with social activities. Alternative provisions would need to be put in place to enable the council to fulfil its statutory duties for adults and children. The concessionary bus pass allows elderly and the disabled residents to travel on the local bus service. Without these services, there is a risk of social isolation. For residents travelling for medical appointments, increased pressure for travel assistance would fall on community transport services and the NHS. Let's move on to Thames Valley Park. This is closed as a public park and ride, but is currently being used by the hospital as a park and ride for staff, operating between Thames Valley Park, Royal Berkshire Hospital, and the Mere Oak Park and Ride site. Income from the hospital will allow the site to break even under the current arrangement. Discussions are taking place to grow this use further next year. Winners Triangle. This is closed, currently under construction, but still has ongoing revenue costs. The project has a £1.3 million overspend. That is the consequence of unforeseen issues caused by the Thames Water main at the park. It has come to light that this was known about in the autumn of 2021, but unfortunately the previous Conservative administration failed to deal with it and make provision in the budget. It falls to us to remedy this and put even more pressure on this year's budget. And the Conservative approved financial white elephant of Coppet Beach, which had a weak business case, reliant on 96% of a 250 space car park to be full. Pie in the sky economics. Even closed, there are still costs for ongoing security, maintenance, insurance, and business rates. We are looking at options to do something with this site, but it will not cover anything near the required shortfall. So let's turn to revenue highway services. This is not about resurfacing schemes, as those are capital funded, but these are services that cover routine safety functions, including emergency works to keep our network safe for the use by the travelling public. Wokingham Borough Council is a highway authority and as such has a statutory duty under Highways Act, Section 41, to maintain the highways maintainable at public expense, for which they have responsibility for. However, those users can claim damages for physical injury or damage caused by failure to comply with the duty. Therefore, the Highway Authority must demonstrate that it has adequate provisions in place, including financial, as a defence under Section 58 of the Act. Taking any funding from this extremely important safety function poses significant risk of claims which can lead to large payouts and expensive court cases. We have a duty to protect the public using our highway assets, and this is an area that we cannot have any funding removed. What about other services and savings? Officers and the executive members have been looking through all the budgets in an attempt to close the £2 million shortfall this year and a £4 million funding gap next year. These financial adjustments are shown in the draft MTFP that are going through Community and Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Committee. The cupboard is empty of any other funding. So what about income generation? Income to run the car parking service is obtained from car parking charges. I presented to the meeting of the executive on the 29th of September a proposal to increase car parking charges that would generate an estimated 540,000 of additional income. and substantially cover the shortfall in the budget for the service. The Conservative group called in the decision, and this was heard on the 25th of October at the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, where it was resolved that the executive decision relating to off-street car parking charges be confirmed. Petition to freeze car parking charges. The Conservative group submitted a petition requesting that the council freeze the car parking charges, which was debated at full council on the 17th of November. This has been referred to the executive this evening to consider. So what are we being asked to consider? This is set out in the report, and there are 3 points to consider. That the executive, little I, agree that no further action is needed in respect of the referral. That is, the current proposal approved on the 29th of September 2022 remains with an estimated additional income of £540,000 per annum. Little 2, agree to take some actions in respect of the referral. Options to consider, little A. Flat rate evening charge 6 p.m. to 10 p.m. at £1. Estimated additional income reduces to £499,000. That's £101,000 below the £600,000 lower limit. B. Wokingham Town and outside Wokingham Town has the same rate during the day, with evening remaining at £1 first hour, £2 for 2 or more hours. Estimated additional income of £461,000. That's £139,000 below the £600,000 limit. Option C is Wokingham Town and outside Wokingham Town has the same day rate, currently set at the lower rate outside of Wokingham Town, and an evening rate of £1. The additional income would reduce to £418,000. That's £182,000 below the £600,000 lower limit. Little 3, agree to support the proposed actions set out in the referral in full. That means freeze car parking charges, but we need to find £600,000 of additional savings.
At least.
As I have said already, all avenues have been explored, and options 2, A, B, and C all require much more money that we do not have. The Conservatives' petition requires even more money, £600,000. Again, money that we do not have. What has exacerbated the higher increase is that there hasn't been an increase in car parking charges in Wokingham for nearly 5 years. Smaller, more frequent increases are more palatable, and many authorities use this model, including neighbouring Bracknell. The previous Conservative administration considered it last year, but failed to deal with it. We are approaching this in a grown-up manner, and to protect our residents and the vast array of important services that Wokingham Borough Council offers, from not slipping into the hands of central government control. Therefore, we have no choice but to reluctantly increase car parking charges for the first time in nearly 5 years. The process for making the advertising of the draft traffic regulation order has been delayed by the calling, the petition to council, and the referral to this meeting. Therefore, I propose a draft timetable as follows. The earliest date for the advertisement of the traffic regulation order, which is a notice of proposal, would be a target date of the 8th of December. Due to Christmas and the New Year festive break, the period for objections will be extended to Sunday, the 22nd of January 2023. These are target dates and they may change. It was originally hoped to introduce these new charges in this financial year, January or February 2023. But with the delays mentioned above, costing around £45,000 per month in lost additional income, they will now not be started until sometime in the new financial year. I therefore recommend that the executive agree to little 1, that no further action is needed in respect of the referral, and officers proceed with the making and advertising of a draft traffic regulation order. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Paul. Are there any?
Make
Yes,
a couple of observations.
certainly is, Prue.
Thank you. So having made an extraordinary amount of noise about this last week at the council meeting, and having lost the petition, we agreed in any case to bring it to this executive meeting. Not a single Conservative has asked a single question about it or turned up to the meeting. I find that extraordinary, that they care so much that they haven't bothered to come. So that's the first thing. The second thing is really why we need to do this. I mean, I think of the council finances as a big black box, and money comes in at the top and spending goes out at the bottom. And we're looking very hard at everything we're spending, because that's one way to try and make the amount that goes out at the bottom match more closely to the amount coming in at the top. But we've also got to try and increase the amount coming in at the top if we can, because the gap is too large. And I think Paul referred to, we've had a 2 million gap this year, and we can't go to the reserves, and we've got a 4 million plus gap for next year. And 80% of our services are statutory. That includes adults and children's, and David and I will be going to overview and scrutiny next Tuesday, I think it is, to explain the problems we're having with the increased demand and cost of things we can do nothing about. We have to spend the money as a council because it's statutory. There are only so many places we can go, and car parking is one of them. And it's one of the only ways we've got to increase the money coming in at the top. So I don't know what else we can do. I don't know. I mean, the Conservatives made one extraordinary speech in the council meeting last week, which was, well, why don't you just tell the officers to go and find the money? Which was so ridiculous. I really couldn't believe that somebody had actually said that. I just don't know what they think we're doing. We have tried everything. We're looking at everything. Everybody's working as hard as they can on the figures, and we've still got a pressure. And we're not the only council in the country. Everybody's in the same state. They're talking about 1 in 6 councils going bust. We can't technically go bust, but effectively going bust. This is not something we want to do. I think we said that repeatedly last week. We have to do it because we don't have any other choices. There are no good choices in this, and this is the one that we have to live with. So I am going to support it. I'm sorry it can't be done a bit quicker. It's costing us, as you said, I think 40-something thousand pounds a month to do it. I don't relish the idea that people will have to pay more for their parking, but I'd rather that than end up with no school places and no children suffering, or adults not being able to get the care they need, or all the other things that might be consequences. Never mind the poor roads, which I know Paul cares about, but it's a really bad thing to have to do, but we have to do it because we are grown-ups and we need to tackle this. So those are my thoughts.
Yeah, thank you, Prue. I think your initial point that there's no questions from any Conservative councillors. There are no Conservative councillors here tonight. Perhaps the reason for that is that the petition asks us to freeze car park charges. The petition was, I think, arranged by Councillor Keith Baker in Woodley. And during the debate at the council, Pauline Jorgensen refused to reverse the charges if they got in power again. So there seems to be some division within the Conservative group as to what they want to do. Do they want to freeze them, or are they going to accept that what we've done is right? I don't know. Maybe they would like to clarify that at some stage. But Paul, I'd like to thank you for your presentation and all the work that you have put in this week to look at seeing if we can change the charges, see if there is any other way that we can still pull back some money to help to get rid of this deficit of 600 to 800,000 in the car park budget. So thank you very much for working very hard on that. Councillor Ferris and I have also visited a lot of retailers in Woodley Town Centre over the weekend and also in Wokingham Town Centre. And we explained to those retailers why the council needed to balance the budget both this year and next year. We explained that we had inherited from the previous administration a shortfall in the budget, that there had been poor budgeting and some things not budgeted for that should have been, and that the General Reserve had been raided last year and we couldn't do it again. There was from many retailers an acceptance that the council has been left in a difficult position. In fact, the whole country, as Prue alluded to, has been left in a difficult position, not just us as residents, but all of the councils in the country. All 300 plus councils in the country are complaining that they are going to be struggling to balance their books this year. We heard how some businesses were already facing difficult issues, such as strong competition from other retailers, competition from online retailers, and difficulties with changes in general shopping habits. Increases in rents were an issue for an awful lot of the businesses. Increases in energy costs were a big issue for just about every business. And these two issues in particular, increases in rents and energy costs, are having a significant effect on retailers' profitability. One manager of a significant business said that Wokingham Borough Council needs to explain more why these charges and why these changes in the charges are necessary. So we must therefore improve our communication and make sure that absolutely everybody in the borough is aware of why these increases in charges are necessary. Are there any other executive members who want to make any comment, say anything? No. Yep.
Question of Paul. You touched on the timescales of the TRO. Are you able to explain anything about the processes of how the TRO would go?
Yeah, once it's advertised, then members of the public, businesses will need to write in with their objections if they feel they need to object.
Okay, so we can see that.
Just before we finish, thank you for your thanks to me, but I'd like to extend that also to the officers who have worked tremendously hard this week on looking under every single stone in the cupboard, under the sofa, everywhere, for any little bits of money that could come forward. And as I said before, the cupboard is bare. We have looked everywhere and it's already gone into the MTFP, or we really need it for revenue, safety, maintenance, which is absolutely paramount to keep our roads safe.
Yeah, thank you, Paul. So The executive have very carefully considered alternative charges. We've looked at all avenues, as you've explained. Lindsay and I have visited, spoken to over 30 businesses, and having considered the petition, the debate, and our investigations following the council meeting, Paul has proposed that he would like the executive to recommend item little I or 1. Yep, which is agree that no further action is needed in respect of the referral. If we need a seconder for that, Bruce happy to do that. All of those in favour? Is unanimous. Thank you very much. I'm told that Rich is now online, so we could go back to your question.
Thank you. Yeah, massive
Is
apologies.
that okay? So if you want to ask your question, Rich, this is a question from Rich Jarvis for the Executive Member for Environment, Sport and Leisure.
Massive apologies. Firstly, I was off work late, so I deeply apologise for that. My question is in relation to the 3G pitch, and it's just around. I'm quite pro it and I'm quite vocal around it. But my question would be: is that how would you propose to promote that pitch within the community and get it to work in harmony with the Maiden Early School?
Yeah, thank you, Rich. There's a little ambiguity about the way your question is expressed on the paper I received. So this answer addresses one meaning of the question. The operating model of the Maiden Early 3G would see the school enjoying a large share of the daytime use. Wokingham Borough Council have other shared school and community use sites, and the school's needs are at the front of all usage decisions. The school would benefit from usage from 9 a.m. to 5 p.m. during the school term. The 3G would also see use by the 2 selected key partner clubs, who have a large member base living in the early and lower early areas. These local clubs would use most of the training and match day slots available, but there is also potential for use by selected partners, such as holiday clubs in school holidays, to give other children outside of the school and outside of the partner clubs the chance to enjoy the site.
That's brilliant, thank you. And you've answered my second question, so I don't need to ask it. So thank you.
Okay, no supplementary then?
No, my supplementary one was about
other. To ask? Okay.
My other one was around about the clubs using it, and like summer clubs, etc. So thank you very much for that.
Okay, thank you. So we move on to item number 67, draft tree strategy. Can I ask the Executive Member for Environment, Sport and Leisure, Ian Shenton, to introduce the item?
Yes, thank you. This is a fairly straightforward report. The Council approved, or the Executive approved in July of last year, the move to developing a new tree strategy for the borough. This would cover every aspect of tree management and tree maintenance. That process has been ongoing. Consultants have been taken on board. Input was gathered from a wide range of sources, and the draft has now been prepared to a point where the officers and myself are relatively happy to go to public consultation. So that's what we're seeking tonight, is approval to take this draft strategy to public consultation. The consultation would start next week, but because it's over Christmas and New Year, we're automatically suggesting 8 weeks rather than the normal 6 weeks. And that would take us into January. The timetable thereafter would probably mean that the final tree strategy doesn't appear before the Executive until May of next year. But that is subject to progress from the end of the consultation. Any questions?
Any questions? Or comments? Sarah, you were first then, Lindsay.
Yeah, no. I mean, obviously, I attended the meeting with you, Ian, on this when we looked at this before this came out, and it's the draft strategy. It's really excellent, and I think a lot of the things that we were wanting to see go into it are in there. Yeah, I mean, there's not a huge amount further to say, but I think if you could just pass on my thanks to the team that have put this together, and obviously the partner organisations. I know obviously we've spoken with the Wokingham District Veteran Tree Association that have inputted into this as well, and it's just great to finally see this draft in front of us and get this out to consultation, because we can do a lot of good work with this. So thank you.
Yes, thank you, Sarah. It's been an excellent effort by the officers concerned. I think pretty much everything has been covered. All members and residents are entitled to make any comments to the consultation that they feel are necessary.
So just one other thing I wanted to quickly say, and I'm really pleased that we're actually got the canopy cover aspect of this, which is really important, because it's one thing to talk about numbers of trees, but if you're planting trees at the same rate they're dying, it's not much of a good target to have. So actually looking at increasing canopy cover is an excellent way of doing this, and I'm really pleased to see this now incorporated into this. So
it's a very good point you make. I agree with it. Lindsay?
First part of what I must say is taking on the point that Gary raised, where he said he thought this only applied to Wokingham Borough Council areas. I understood this was the overall plan for the borough, but could you could clarify? And secondly, with my local plan hat on, I'm looking to see how we can bring in the tree strategy into the future local plan that we're in the process of developing, so that we have got a policy associated with protecting as many trees as possible. I particularly want to support all of the veteran trees that we can, and we know there's 8,000 of them, and that issue has been mentioned, and I'd just like to understand how you would see that linking in to it, because we've been discussing this issue.
Well, there really is an issue around those trees that are not considered significant or veteran, or those in the middle age range, if you like. They've gone beyond youth, they're in middle age, but they need to be allowed to mature, or we won't have another generation of veteran trees. And at the moment, it's all too easy for developers to turn around and say, oh, well, that's not an important tree, it's not significant, it's not on the veteran tree list, that can come out. That's one of the points that we have to address, and we have to make sure that this middle ground of the overlooked trees manage to get to maturity, full maturity, to become veterans and significant trees. Otherwise, there will be nothing in a couple of 100 years' time to take the place of the current veterans.
And I should add the importance of veteran trees from a biodiversity perspective. And I mean, obviously there's all sorts of reasons for the value of them, but the biodiversity in particular, not to mention the natural heritage that they bring as well. This sits very closely with cultural heritage as well, about having places that people want to live in that feel connected to an area, and our trees are very much part of that, as well as all the environmental things we talk about. And this is something that's been picked up in this. But yeah, veteran trees are a huge part of the whole ecosystem. So, and as Ian says, we need to make sure that we have, trees coming up through that process.
Yes, Ian, thank you for that comment back about the trees that are not currently veteran trees, but are in that category that in 50 years' time they would be veteran trees, or getting best that way. I think that is one of the most significant parts of what we need to do to get into our future local plan to protect trees, because I asked questions about a blanket TPO, and that was found not to be. So therefore, the next approach was policy, and this is a good this is a good document to work from. And what I want to be able to put in is the suitable policy within the local plan that can protect as many trees as possible, particularly the canopy cover aspect, because that is so significant. And I remember looking at the cut down oak trees in Embrook area, and somebody said to me, "Oh, we can plant trees to replace them." And I stood straight back at that person and said, "It takes 150 years to get a 150-year-old oak tree back," and we've got to remember that. We can't carry on just willy-nilly knocking trees down because it's slightly in the way. Why can't they redesign things to avoid them? And I think we have got to, because if we don't defend them now, like too many houses in this borough, the character of this area changes and changes forever. And we've got to keep that diversity, because if all the trees are only 10 and 15 years old, it only has a certain type of biodiversity, and it takes an enormous length of time. And I remember seeing a program about an oak tree. That oak tree has an ancient oak. It has an enormous amount of environmental activity going on, and I really love butterflies, and purple hair streak butterflies live in an oak tree, and that's their area and that's their home. We cut them down, it's gone, and they're gone. And I think we have now got to start looking that way to protect what we have, because if we don't protect it now, you'll suddenly turn around in 5 and 10 years' time and it is gone.
Okay.
And I think planning has a significant role to play here, because there has perhaps at times been too lax an attitude to some of the less mature trees that have been considered dispensable, and they're not. Also hedgerows, they're not dispensable either. About 1,500 species rely on hedgerows. It's an enormous number. And hedgerows do contribute. And we're lucky. Wokingham has about 22%. The borough has about 22% canopy cover, compared to the UK average of about 16%. We're ahead of the game, but we must stay there. We must, if we can, grow that further.
Can I just put that in the context that we are the most nature depleted G7 country? We are one of the most nature depleted countries in the world. So while 22% might be above average for the UK, that's in the context of a country that is absolutely disgraceful on protecting nature.
Okay. Prue?
Just a brief comment, because the action plan at the end, if Gary were to read that, he would see that there are actions which apply to council-owned land, but there's also lots of actions that apply to land in general. So it definitely is a plan that covers everybody. And the action plan has been going ahead anyway, I see, because we've already been allocating trees to residents to plant in their gardens, haven't we, as part of it?
We will extend our tentacles as far as we feasibly can. We will engage with town and parishes as well, and with private landowners.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions or comments? No? So on page 17, agenda item 67, the recommendation is that the executive approve the undertaking of an 8-week public consultation on the draft tree strategy. All those in favour? Thanks, unanimous. Item number 68, Buckinghamshire, Oxfordshire and Berkshire West Integrated Care Partnership Joint Committee. And I ask David to take us through this.
Yeah, thank you. The ICS, which is Integrated Care System, is as a board, which is the ICB. Below the board is an Integrated Care Partnership, which is the local authorities in the area of the board who meet to look at strategy and how we can go forward. Below that is PLACE, which is the outworkings in place, and obviously we'll have a lot to do with PLACE as well. I'd like to thank Councillor Jones for helping me to get a place on this ICP. The ICS wing is called Bob, Berkshire, Oxfordshire and West, Berkshire West, Oxfordshire and Buckinghamshire Care Partnership. And because it's Berkshire West, there are 3 unitaries there. There was at one time a suggestion that the 3 unitaries could be covered by 1 vote. And we worked hard to make sure that that didn't happen. We might be a little bit like West Berkshire, but certainly we're not like Reading, and we want our own vote anyway. And so I'd like to thank Councillor Jones for helping me to get that. We need to be on this board. We need to be helping the health service make decisions. Certainly, I know my director, Matt Pope, and I have been very impressed by the person who's the director of place for this area. She seems to be thinking the way that we think, let's put it like that, and not the old NHS way of it's you and us and we're against each other. It's working together, and that is very positive. So I'd like to ask you to approve this so that I can be a member on the ICP with Councillor Jones as my deputy.
I'm very happy with that. Any other comments? Anybody want to say anything? No? Well, thank you very much, David. Thank you for stepping up to be able to take on that position. And that you are absolutely right to say it is very important that Wokingham has its own voice, that it isn't West Berkshire and the 3 unitary councils of West Berks, Reading and ourselves. We have our own voice, and I'm absolutely sure that you will use that voice for the benefit of the people of Wokingham. So item 68, page 103, the recommendation is there. All in favour? Unanimous. Thank you very much. And I think that is the end of the executive tonight. Thank you very much for coming. Thank you very much for the members of the public for attending, and thank you very much for all of the officers for giving up your time. Good night.